So now we're at our lecture for this first part of week 3. And as I said, we're doing it in reverse a little bit. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to follow along with me, and that's what this is. This will be our HTML and CSS. And then I'll give you commit messages along the way, and I'll say, okay, here at this place, commit. Okay? Okay, so I've actually moved from the Windows laptop that I was showing you all how to clone and how to do the Git workflow to my standard station, which is a Mac. So in this sense, it should not look much different. Probably the only difference is that on the Mac, I use ZSH. I could absolutely use bash, but now that you have Git installed, right, it doesn't really matter because the commands we're going to use are going to be, and I'm just doing Git version here to show you that I do have it installed, is that it doesn't really matter because the commands will work on whatever terminal. Again, I don't know if command on Windows may or may not, but for most of you, you're either using, if you're on a Mac, you're using ZSH or you're using bash. Or if you're on Windows, you're probably using PowerShell or bash. Okay, so I also have in here, so I have my repos for my private and my public, which you should have. And here's what I'm going to have you do. I had you already do this, but if for some reason you haven't, under the lectures, now what I'm doing here, and this is good to understand, is part of this is just learning to navigate VS Code. And I've made it a little bigger here. So I've shown you how to open these repos directly, but for this assignment, I'm going to leave it here. I may change it during that. But in the beginning, I'm going to down arrow, and what that does is it collapses whatever directories are inside of here. And again, this is a directory, but it's also a cloned repo that has all that connection out to GitHub. So now lectures, and here you have already had some that I've had you do. Maybe you'll see a little more files here than I will. But I did have you create this HTML CSS folder, and then inside of there, I just had you create an index file. Okay, so this is a fairly common thing now that we're moving on to other topics. But what I'm going to have you do here in this HTML and CSS directory, I'm going to have you create a new file. So in here, I'm going to have you create a file, and it's going to be called HTML CSS.md, so markdown. Okay. Okay, so now we're looking at a markdown file. Again, we have this idea of now that we've added a file, it's untracked. We haven't staged it or committed it into the repo. So it's untracked, so it's showing as green. But this one is already being tracked, so we know that. And we haven't changed it, so there's no difference there. So in here, this markdown file, and this is part of why I want to be in here. Actually, we'll talk about that maybe at some point. So what I'll have you do here, and this will look different for you depending on what you have set up. I'm going to do a pound. I'm going to say HTML CSS notes. Okay. Cool. So now we have some notes in this file. So unlike on the GitHub interface that I talked a lot about at this point already, understanding the difference between us working local as we are here, and then working on GitHub. One of the differences is also how the files are actually, how we look at them. So in this case, there's a couple options for us to look at them. And if you go up to the top, I believe standard install for VS Code here is actually, if you just click here, it'll do a preview. It'll do a side-by-side, and then we don't want to look at changes at this point, although we definitely could talk about what that is. So I'm just going to hit open preview. Now what that is going to do is on this side of the page, then I'm going to see a preview of the notes as they would appear in the browser. So this is a good thing to understand because it bleeds through, or it leads through a lot of different topics that we'll cover during web stuff, web technologies, intro to web, is that we write code and then that code is rendered somehow. Now in this case it's rendering a markdown file, but we're going to learn today how to look at that HTML file rendered locally. And there's always a couple of ways to do things, okay? So at this point, right, let's go ahead and put 2, and we'll put week 3, right, Monday, even though for us it was a holiday, right, dash, right. Now see, again, look over here and notice, and this is kind of cool because then you can see side by side, and I'm going to make this just a little, not quite as big, right. So let's talk about kind of, now at this point I'll have you come back here and take notes on various topics that I have, but at this point I just want you to have that file available so that you can see it. So let's start by talking about extensions, okay? Now extensions, now how do you do, right, subheadings, right? Actually I think it's dash. Oh, actually all you have to do is hit tab. No? Oh, that does a line. Oh, there you go. Just hitting tab. I was thinking it was dash, but okay. So extensions. So the first one we're going to do is called go live, or what we generally call live server, but go live. Okay. So you're going to learn about extensions, and then I'm going to show you about a specific one that you need to have from here on out, and also talk about prettier. Okay. There's 2 I generally recommend when we're starting web development, intro to web development, because these 2 are probably the most common I see out there. So let's show you where you get these extensions. So if you come over here, and this, what we're looking at here is really the interface for VS Code. And as you learn more and you use VS Code more, you'll start to understand it. But when you first get in here, if you've never been in here, it can be a little overwhelming. Like here's the Explorer window. So if I click on and off, what that does is it gives me my Explorer window here. Okay, and if I want to search for something, a very common thing might be a search and replace. I do that there. And this is actually kind of a little busy screen that can be like, what is it talking about? It's basically tracking the code as you're writing it, and it's going to, you can commit from here, but I recommend really doing commits on the command line. But it will also show you changes or code that you've done and it's changed. This one is something you won't use until later. This is when we're running files locally, like maybe a JS file, and here's the extensions. Okay. So in here, mine is going to look different than yours because this is about what you have installed, okay? So what I want you to do here is search for something I already have installed, which is called Live Server, okay? And when you search for Live Server, there's a couple. And this is where it's like, make sure we're getting the right one. Right? Because I think I ended up showing the wrong one last semester, and it did throw students off. So part of that is me just making sure, which one do I have? And so here's how I can do that, is I can click into here, and I go, okay, Riddick is the one who has this one. This is what it looks like. Okay, so let's go in here, because I already have it, but when you do this, Live Server, right? And then you can click on the one that says Riddick Ray Day, and then you should see that one. And then when you do that, what you want to do is enable it, okay? So mine says disabled because it's already enabled. So what you're going to want to do here is enable it, okay? All right, so when you get that one done, then let's go ahead and click off for a second, off of here, and we'll go ahead and drop. And this is just a landing page that shows you, and this is good to know too, is like it's also some documentation. Not sure why it's not moving. It should be. Interesting. I'll go ahead and cut it off. But on that page, you will actually be able to see some information about the extension itself, some documentation. Now, once you install that, you may have to get out of VS Code and get back in. But one of the things, generally what we're looking for is down here in the corner, and it's called Go Live. Okay, now we're not going to hit this yet because I'll show you a little more about this. So right now we have installed an extension. Hopefully you see it, right? We are going to go back to File Explorer because I had dropped that a minute ago. And we're going to click on the index file now, okay? And so when I click on the index file, there was nothing on that file, right? We had just created it. There was nothing inside of it. And I'm actually going to have you do this. I'm going to have you do the explanation point, and this is going to bring up something called emit, and this is a quick way, a way to shortcut writing HTML, CSS, and basically those two. So once you do that, and then you hit, I think it's tab, right? Let me do that again. I'm going to undo. So in order for this to work, after you hit the explanation point there, and you can see it here, so you can actually see in your, this is something where VS Code is just trying to help you say, oh, here's what's going to happen, okay? So when you do this and you hit, does enter work? Oh, enter works as well. So for my particular, on my Mac, I think this is probably true for Windows as well. Right? When you do that, it writes this code for you, which is what we call boilerplate HTML. Okay, we're going to come back around to this in a minute, but I just wanted to show you this here. Okay, because what I want to do is see if your go live is working. Okay, so come down to the here, and we're going to say intro into the title first, intro to HTML and CSS. Okay, so I'm going to show you where this title will show up, and then we'll come down here and we'll do H1. And this H1, when you type it here, again, Emmet is going to actually help you, and I'm going to hit tab, and it will actually then write the code, the beginning tag and the ending tag. So this is what we call a it's not self-closing, it has a beginning tag and an ending tag. Some tags only have one tag, and we'll show you that. Matter of fact, you can see it up here. The meta tag doesn't have an ending tag, but the title does, the head does, the HTML does. And then we'll talk about what this means in a little bit. Okay. Okay. Okay, put something like that. Does it work? Okay, so now what we're going to do, we did all this work in order for you to see if when you hit go, and hopefully you see it, okay? I'll show you a way around it if you don't, because it's not, because this is on your local system, I wouldn't know if it works or not. I'm just trying to show you kind of an easier way to do things. So I'm going to go ahead and hit go live. Now when I do that, it opens up a tab, okay? Cool, it opens up a tab. And then I see that HTML that I wrote, that H1. And then I see also, when I'm looking at the tab, that title. Okay, so I know, and also if I come and look up here, it's going to show me 127, right? It's going to show me what we call an IP number. Hopefully you know what that is. If not, let me know, but it's basically a addressing system. And for this one, it's on my local system within this port. It's showing me that's the directory I'm in, that's the subdirectory, so to speak, and it just shows me all that content. Which, by the way, right now, I could also here, right, / if you remember right, there's also that markdown file, right? So I could say HTML, what was the name of that file I had you create? HTML CSS.markdown. So now we could also just change the URL here, right? We can change the address to then render that markdown file. Okay, and the nice thing is here, if you just hit the back button, it'll take you back here. Okay, so we're going to do our first commit on this one, right? So, and I want you to put in here, right, H2, does it work? And then yes or no, okay? Did it work for you? Yes, great, no problem. If no, right, and it's not that it's going to be wrong, it's just for you to understand, you might want to reach out if you had any problems with that. Okay, so now that we're here, we're actually going to do our first commit. Okay, so we have created, we've updated a file, modified, we've created a file. So then if you remember in this git workflow, we can use the same commands to do the git workflow itself. And remember, the git workflow is we work locally and then we push code to GitHub so that we can then submit it for assignment in this case, right? So down in here, if you don't have terminal, and by the way, I was playing with Control tilde here just to, and that's a keyboard shortcut. But if you don't know that, you can go up to View, go to Terminal, and anytime you're looking at something, you can kind of stop along the way and go, oh, there's keyboard shortcuts for all that stuff. Okay, so it's good to learn shortcuts. It's not absolutely imperative, especially when you're first starting out. Now, if I type get status here, even before I do it, what will happen? In your mind, I want you to think about this. What will happen based on my current location, right, when I type get status? Okay, so now I want you to tell me, let's do a P up here, why did I get the error? Okay, so you tell me why. So you can do another P. So, okay. Or we can make that a heading. Actually, that'd be kind of fun. We can make this an H3. Now notice what happened when I went up there and typed H3. It actually changed the ending code. And then why did I get the error? So you tell me why. Okay? Your best guess. Now, this might be one of those things when I show you in a minute, you might be tempted to actually say, oh, wait a minute, you know, I'm going to go back and put the right answer in there. If you didn't know it, don't worry about it. All right, it's just a matter of catching on because we've actually talked about this before. And the reason that we get this error is we're typing get a command, we're typing status. In order for the get command to work, we have to be inside of a repo. And in this case, because I have the CIT82SP24 opened, I'm not inside of a repo. So that command says, hey, I'm not in a repo. I don't know what to do here. So there's a couple things I could do. I could do CD space. Now this is where I showed before, if I type Rio and hit tab, it will look at the two, in this case, folder/repos that are on there, and it'll give me at least, it'll match it. If those were unique, it would actually find it if there was only one folder with the Rio in there. Okay, I could do that, but I could also just type it, right? I could type Rio Waller dash, in this case, private. And now why would I do private? Because that's where we're working right now. This is where we need to complete the get workflow. Okay, so now if I type get status, I'm like, oh, okay, now I'm getting somewhere. Now I'm starting to see some messages that make sense. So I have a modified and I have an untracked file. So here's where I can do get, and now I'm going to clear, just, okay, get add star. And these commands, you know, probably for the next couple times I'll walk through them with you, but I'll eventually just say do the get workflow, use this message, right? Get add star, which says add both of these, and this star is adding, which is called staging. Even though it says add, it's actually adding it to the staging area. Get commit dash m, right? And we'll say created our update. Actually, let's say created mark md file and updated index.html. Okay. So we hit enter here. Now we have added it to the, we've staged it, we've committed it. Okay. Now we can keep going at this point. We don't have to do get push yet because that's only when you're done and you're ready to submit. Now if you're wanting to make sure you did it right, you can totally do get push here. Okay, totally do that. And then boom, it'll push it to GitHub and you can go look at it. But more than anything, just helping you kind of hopefully become a little more efficient. Okay, so here's where we're going to end this one. Is I'm going to have you take a few notes. Okay, so we're going to go back to the MD file. So now we're going to go back here and we'll do this and we'll go our path forward. Okay, and here's what I want you to know. So I'm not going to take notes here. This is your job, right? So I want you to take oh, I gotcha. So as soon as I typed in, oh, that's interesting. I bet I have the wrong mark down there. Anyway, no, not a big deal. Maybe I'll go look at it. Okay, so our path forward. So here's what I want you to know. is I just put this together so you could kind of see. Like what I did today is I'm just, and we're not done for this lecture, but what I'm doing is really starting to introduce you to, you know, HTML, but we're really talking about it in terms of just the local dev environment setup. Okay, so we'll cover this, we'll talk about, because there's actually not a huge number of HTML tags, and we're not going to go over all of them, but I'm going to give you that basic structure, right? And then probably not this time, maybe we'll see. We'll start talking about CSS, right? So HTML is a page structure. CSS is the presentation or the idea of making it look good, styling it. Okay, so we style cascading style sheets. That's what CSS stands for. And this will be our intro. We'll end up doing HTML and CSS intro for probably 2 weeks for lectures, just to give you that intro. Okay, now then we'll move on to Bootstrap. Bootstrap is a way of creating sites really quickly and doesn't require us to have all that depth of CSS knowledge that would create responsive design or responsive sites. So it kind of allows us to just we get to lean into something somebody else has already created, and it's a very quick way to create websites. So it is just good to know. So we'll spend about a week or two on Bootstrap and learning the Bootstrap, because if we were to try to build Project Zero for this class with just the little bit of intro that we're going to get here, it wouldn't make sense, because intro to web is really for us about giving you experience with HTML and CSS, showing you how to use Bootstrap, the benefits of having this built-in structure. Okay, and then you're going to find a template that is a Bootstrap, and I should have said that here. You're going to find a Bootstrap template. So in addition to learning Bootstrap, you're going to end up finding a template that somebody's already created in the Bootstrap framework. So you're going from kind of lower writing HTML, CSS, a little bit abstraction here. So make sure you're getting some of these things in your notes. You're abstracting away by not having to completely understand all the Bootstrap, although we're going to give you the basics, like how does the grid work, right? And there'll just be some and that's just one of the things we'll learn in Bootstrap. And then we'll help you find, we'll have a whole assignment where you find a template based on Bootstrap. And then what you will do is you'll create your Project Zero from the template. Okay, so when I say, when our Project Zero, which by the way is 25% of your grade, it's creating, and this is where students freak out, because I say it's a 21-page website, but it's not like you're having to create all of this structure. You're going to lean into, right, Bootstrap and a template in order to create that. So even though it can sound overwhelming, I've been through this enough times to hear students go, "Oh my God, I don't know how to create something like that." Well, don't worry. Many students have done it before you. It is very doable with the way you're going to learn it. Okay, so that's the path forward. Okay, so there's a lot more we do in between here. There's a lot more topics we cover, but these are mostly the lectures that we will do from here. I think we have a couple other ones in there, but so I'm just kind of giving you, right? So in there, I would want to see path forward, okay? So then have some notes in here, and at this point we're not finished, but I'm at least going to have you go ahead and commit again. Okay, so your commit message now, right, guess what it's going to be? It'll be path forward. So now on your own, complete the git workflow, git add, git commit, and the message will be path forward. And then I'll come back with one more video before we finish this one up. All right.